Approximately over 99% of the global population breathe air that does not meet the World Health Organization's air quality guidelines. My friends, this means that nearly everyone on this planet is exposed to air pollution that can harm their health. Now, air pollution is now recognized as one of the second leading cause of premature death worldwide, responsible for millions of deaths each year. In fact, more than people died from air pollution than if we put together malaria, HIV, AIDS, and tuberculosis combined. Now, my friends, beyond these devastating health impacts that are caused by air pollution, actually there is another thing, that air pollution is stealing years from our lives. It has been estimated that air pollution reduced the average human lifespan for about 1.8 years globally, and that's more than smoking and alcohol. And for those living in the most populated regions, this number can be even higher. Despite the global effort to reduce emissions and improve air quality, the air pollution crisis has intensified in some cities, reaching records that are breaking levels. One of the cities that has been making global headlines is the city of Lahore in Pakistan. It is estimated that the air pollution from these cities, actually the levels from air pollution are so extreme that it is now one of the most polluted cities in the world. One of some few days ago, Lahore Air Quality Index actually has reached up to 1,000 levels, so high that they are off the chart from the recommended based on a World Health Organization, which is actually 100. So the air pollution levels that has been recorded in these cities 10 times that the guidelines of the World Health Organizations. Now, there are a lot of things that we need to see. We need to understand the factors that leading to this situation. What caused the air pollution to reach this high? What can be done to reduce the impact? And on other perspective, different countries, especially developing countries, what can they learn from the developed countries? There's a lot of things that we need to understand, and I'm so excited that today I have another person who stopped by for a conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Robyn Schofield. She is Associate Professor in the School of Geography, Earth and Atmospheric Science, and she is actually Associate Dean of Environment and Sustainability. Her expertise spans from the complexity of air quality, climate interaction, and the airborne transmissions of particles. She is also deeply involved in national and international research communities, serving as the member and the chair of expert panel on atmospheric and oceanic composition, Australian Meteorological and Oceanography Society, AMOS. Robyn, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
I hope everything is fine and you enjoy.
Yep.
The weather's getting warmer and colder, very confusing.
Yes, we're in Melbourne. It's either hot winds from the north or cold blasts from the Southern Ocean.
I see that. Robyn, new reports suggest that now we have a problem. There is another city, which I think right now ranks as one of the top polluted city in the world. It's Lahore from Pakistan. They have broken the record for over a century with air pollution levels staggering up to 1,000 concentration. What does this mean? If we put together all this global effort to reduce emissions from different sources, and then here we are.
Yeah, so the numbers I saw from Lahore are actually 1,000, an air quality index of 1,000, and the WHO is, if you're meeting those standards, you want to be below 100. So it's almost like a percentage. So it means that the numbers and the air that they're breathing there is essentially 10 times worse than the health standards, health guidelines produced by WHO. So yes, we do need to get those numbers down. Obviously, it's really challenging for the population there. the air is coming in from somewhere else, and so the people impacted are not the people responsible for that air pollution. And so that's one of the really big inequities in air quality, that those that are most impacted are probably the least responsible for it, and the least able to do anything about it.
This is actually pretty scary, because if you try to see the statistics, and people suggest that different reports shows that actually the total premature death caused by air pollution is actually way far if we combine all the scary diseases like HIV, AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis combined. And here we are in another city still developing, and yet they are struggling with this kind of air. And even if you could take a look based on different reports on ways that the government suggested that they can prevent, the ways that can be used to prevent more disasters, I don't think people knows much, because one of the comments that I read from the news published by The Guardian just 2 days ago, it shows that the government suggested that people should wear at least surgical mask, especially when they're outside and even inside, outdoor and indoor, both. But most people don't consider that as the way to do that, because they feel like, okay, this is just like a normal, regular kind of air, normal just event, and then it will just pass by. And there is, you did an interview a while ago, and I took that comment. You say, it is pretty easy to deal with kind of pollution that you can see, for example, cleaning trashes, dust and everything. But it is very it is very difficult to deal with something that you cannot see. But the effects are speaking very loud.
That's right. And so with air, we breathe 17 kilograms of air a day. Our lungs have a surface area of about a tennis court. And so that's our exposure to this environment. It's our biggest exposure to the environment. And so if you can't see the air pollution, which with many pollutants you cannot see it, you don't think it's dangerous for you. But of course, we know from the statistics that air pollution is the leading environmental risk factor, and what it does to you, you breathe in poor air, your body's can either not get enough oxygen, or those pollutants pass into your bloodstream and deposit and cause problems, and they can cause problems in your liver and spleen, your reproductive system. Obviously, they put a lot of stress on your heart, and if your brain doesn't get enough oxygen as well. So we see heart attacks, we see stroke, and air pollution being a major contributor of those. So people might die of a heart attack or a stroke, and they might not necessarily associate it with an air pollution event. But we know that these air pollution events cause a massive spike in hospitalizations first up, and then deaths.
And speaking of which, because they said one of the kind of pollutant that is caused so much problem in there is actually PM 2.5, and just yesterday the level reached up to 600. And if you take a look on a standard based on the World Health Organization, it's 15, the standard microgram per cubic. But I don't think people do actually understand what really means do we say PM 2.5, and why is it so scary? And because we often don't hear about PM2.1, PM2.3, maybe for example PM10 and something like that. But the most one that highly associated with a healthy situation is actually a PM2.5. And most people don't understand much about what do you mean when you say about PM2.5, and why is it so scary?
Okay, so PM, first up, means particulate matter. So it's actually anything that is in the air in some sort of suspension, so it can be solid or liquid suspension in the air. And the 2.5 refers to the size, so 2.5 microns or 10 microns. And we have another class actually called ultrafines, which are 0.1 of a micron. And our ability to measure PM10 and PM2.5 are why those numbers are reported, and we're really concerned about them. But actually, even worse implications are when the particles are really small, 0.1 of a micron. The health implications of those are essentially not yet really well understood, and I think we can expect that they'll be even worse. Now, the reason they're really bad is because PM2.5 can easily pass, so it passes into your lungs, passes across the lung into your blood, and it carries with it often a lot of toxic chemicals, which then go on to, so the metals, for example, then can deposit in placentas for pregnant women. They cross into your brain, and so there are links there to actually to diabetes and all sorts of preterm labour. So preterm birth, it's a major contributor there, and then we've got cognitive issues that have been associated as well. So the impacts are systemic because we need we need oxygen in every part of our body, and therefore if our air is contaminated, it's using those pathways to actually impact every organ of our body.
Oh, yeah, I see. So in these kind of case, for a city like this one to reach levels too high, like more than at least 10 times than the threshold standard recommended by the World Health Organization, what might be the reason for these levels to be so high?
So major sources of PM2.5 and this particulate matter broadly are fire. So combustion processes definitely lead to these high levels. And so where you've got agricultural practices which are likely to burn the leftover, the chaff out in the fields, if you're burning waste, if you've got a lot of heavy polluting traffic and a busy city with perhaps ships and all sorts of things coming in, you're needing, if you're using combustion processes for heat within your homes or for cooking, for example, all of these are the major sources. So it's why our cities are often much higher with PM2.5. But when you compound that with an agricultural area around a city, and that, or you've got wildfires going on, certainly in the US as well, and we experience it here in Australia. You get the smoke coming in from those wildfires, and you really need to have good buildings, filtration in place. So you want, if you have an HVAC system, so HVAC is heating, ventilation and air conditioning systems, and they have filters on them, and you can filter for the smoke out of there and things. But we've had cases here in Australia, not in our, with our Black Summer bushfires, where the smoke was the ingress of it. That's ingress means it's come inside within the hospital birthing suites was so high it was really problematic, and it's very difficult to you're treating people that are in that case, hopefully not sick, but in an environment which is really poor. So it's compounding and making things even more difficult.
And another thing that I think we need to understand here is the authorities trying so hard, and with the collaboration from other institutes and organizations, to educate people. And the pattern is the same. You get education, you become aware, and then you make choices that will help you to protect from the troubles, from the problem caused by the air pollution or anything else. Here in Melbourne, with what we've been through so far, for example, like fire events, dust, and something like that, are we on the right path? To educate people? And with what we see, just by assumption, is our education system help to raise enough awareness for people to be aware and make choices? For example, with what we've seen from this city, despite of being educated, despite of using different kind of strategies to manage, at least try to reduce the outcome, the impact, the short-term impact, yet still people choices make it difficult for government to find a good way to help them.
It's interesting there, you're pushing, and it is often a dialogue, pushing the onus on the individual to react.
Definitely.
And this is really a policy landscape when we're talking about air, because not only there is the personal choice aspect, but by just introducing, fuel standards and making choices such as London has low emission zones, that sort of thing, can have a massive impact. And so I think Melbourne has a really quite a long way to go, because the policy frameworks that would bring about massive benefit to everyone who is breathing in our cities, which is everyone.
I understand that one. And speaking, we're still in the same pathway. We have a policies after getting some understanding from how the weather works and how the air interact with it and all that kind of stuff. If you've read the report from Lahore, the government, the quickest way that they come across to reduce the problem, it is actually to do cloud seeding. Is it the ultimate solution for a quick way to respond to reduce the air pollution events, especially during the extreme events like this one?
I haven't read evidence of its effectiveness. You can certainly understand why people might be excited about it, because if you can have a rainfall event, it will clear out the aerosols and the dust, etc. So there is the hope, and that's the motivation behind that intervention. But really, the only thing that does clear the air out really effectively of these particulate matter is air cleaning devices, filtration. And so the best and most effective intervention is really air cleaners, air purifiers that are pulling in, if you're in a small or confined sort of space, they clean massive amounts of air in a short period of time. And therefore, if you've got, if you suffer from asthma, if you have any sort of lung compromised condition, having an air cleaner, allergies as well. So anyone who suffers from allergies, they'll definitely know that having an air cleaner in the home, removing combustion sources from the home, even removing carpets, because carpets can be a massive source of dust. All of those interventions can immediately lower the particulate matter exposures within the house. And when you've got those external smoke events that come in, or just you're living on a very busy road where you're constantly being exposed to high particulate matter levels, having these air cleaners is something that, as an individual or as a city, if you're placing these and ensuring that your public buildings are delivering clean air for the community, that our schools have these, that is one of the most effective interventions.
That's a very good point. Now, in some cases, in most of the cases, the air pollution, highest extreme event, and actually the air pollution itself, the air quality, in general, it is controlled by 3 factors. There are so many factors, but in general, we categorize into 3 parts: weather, emissions, and the chemistry.
That's right. Yep.
So, in a very easiest way, just for public to understand, when we are talking about the weather, how is the weather related to the air pollution, and how sometimes it can make even worse? If you're talking for emissions, what do we mean by that? Last 2 episodes, I had a very good discussion with Robyn here, and he explained so much about shipping emissions and how we should be very careful, especially right now, whereby most of countries expands port authority to have more ships to get in the country delivering goods. And then we have a chemistry, the chemical part of each and everything. How can we break down these kind of 3 different factors in here to help a person to understand if the air pollution is in this level? Probably it might be one or among of these factors, or it might be a combination of all of them.
That's right. So weather, or rather the topography, and usually we're talking about cities here. So we've got the Indian cities, which are flanked on one side by mountains, and so what can happen if you've got a city that has a lot of mountains around them? The air can be very settled, and so in wintertime you'll have what's called a shallow boundary layer. And the boundary layer is you can think of that as it's the layer of the atmosphere which has the most interaction with the surface and allows exchanges. It's sort of like the volume of your cup, if you like. Now, that's quite shallow, and if you have your lots of emissions into that, then you've got only a small space, and so the concentrations can get very high very quickly. And whereas on a warm summer's day, that boundary layer is expanded because you've got heat at the surface, which sets up a convective system, and you get a much larger vessel that you're emitting into, which means the concentrations are lower and your pollution is lower. So winds ventilate a city. So if you've got a nice sea breeze coming in, and many parts of the cities, or often many cities are on coastal areas, but not all the city will be able to be ventilated nicely. But this is where city planning becomes important. So you want to build to be able to ventilate rather than creating buildings that don't let the sea breeze come into the city and rather block.
Yeah, so this is the key point that when we've discussed about, okay, so we've taken a look about the topography itself and the kind of weather that is associated with it. Another thing, we have emissions in here. And speaking of which, when we're talking about emissions, I want to add something in there. The city of Lahore, the government city, they've complained about their neighbor, India, especially in mega cities in there. And their complaint is actually about, they say, this kind of pollution here is not from within our city. It is from the neighborhood, which is, I think it's a season for preparing farms and something like that for burning, large scale farm. And this we call transboundary pollution.
Mm-hmm.
How can we be able to cope from this one, and what can we do when it comes for this matter?
So I would be suggesting that to look at how Europe has dealt with this issue. So Europe has gone through this process of coming together to tackle transboundary pollution, and it's something that Asia and is aware of, as well as that transboundary international agreements are really the mechanism that will allow progress in this space. There's certainly the recognition that it is a really big and challenging problem to solve, but by working together through these international agreements is almost certainly the fastest and best way forward.
That's a very good thing. The recent report from a State of Global Air Pollution stated that there is another problem. And in the report, their suggestion was totally in how many countries so far that we know the air pollution of, the levels of air pollution of, and how many countries that we yet to know. For example, the current report, they say they use air pollution, sensors from 135 countries. And we have a total of 195 countries. 130 provides enough information. And speaking of which, over 70% of all the available data used worldwide, especially from Latin America and Caribbean, 70% of the data are used from low-cost sensors. In Africa, 1/3 of the entire continent still don't have any kind of information, especially from the low sensors or even high standard kind of sensors that can provide enough information from air pollution. Now we're still experiencing these disasters, the air pollution disasters, extreme disasters from all around different countries in the world. And yet, still, there are so many places that we don't know of. How much do we know that these people are struggling with? How can we help them? Because it feels like the focus of the countries and the regulations is yet it's not more into environment, especially deeper into environment, air pollution, climate change, and something like that. What can we do?
Well, if you want to manage anything, you do need to measure it. That's the first thing that needs to happen. Now, it is costly to have a calibration network in place, and so when countries are dealing with other economic issues such as food security or health systems, monitoring the air, which of course, as we've already talked about, is all interrelated, both with food security actually. Crop yields are much lower when it's polluted, but also health, clearly. It's major environmental. So an investment in monitoring is actually an investment in both food and health. And so that's the first thing that, in terms of educating our policymakers is one thing that we do need to make really very clear. The second part of that is that we really do have monitoring systems in the sky, obviously, satellites. And satellites can provide coverage globally, and they can provide those insights to everyone, as long as you've got access to the internet, which of course is a major inequality, but it's not costly to make these measurements. It's costly if you don't actually.
So that's actually a very good point, and I am struggling so much, at least to help my country to have a standards air quality station. I hope so before the end of my studies. Probably might be successful on that pathway. And as Australia, as Melbourne, Sydney, as we are examples around the world, for example, Melbourne is considered as one among of the livable city around the world. Where we are, and with what we do right now, are we on the right path? Because we are considered as the global example. So how let's try to understand where we are in a global state, and what can we teach other countries? How can they reflect from us if we are talking about the air pollution disaster, then we want to move forward into net negative zero emissions in 2060s?
That's right. So while we are obviously here a wealthy country, Australia, and that we have no reason not to act on air pollution. I think we still haven't got those education pieces in place here. I think people are complacent and do think the air is generally good, despite it being double the road toll here. We do have, here in Melbourne, I talked about those cold breezes coming through from the Southern Ocean. And so, we've basically got this beautiful clear air coming in occasionally, but we often don't. We have also fires and smoke come through onto the city, and that can cause all sorts of problems. We have we have traffic driven emissions that are problematic. And so I don't think we are actually here in Australia, I don't think we've got the monitoring set up that we really do need to act on this. Although, arguably we know what some of those actions need to be. I think the population deserves to know what this air pollution is like, and our those Black Summer bushfires really highlighted to the public that they weren't having enough information to be informed about whether or not to cancel events. You don't want to be holding a sporting event. You can't give people, just say that the air is bad and not give people actions to be able to take for that. So when the air is bad, that's when event managers do need to cancel events. Schools need to cancel outdoor play, these sort of things. So there's many systems that we have built which are great. So we have that now, clear guidance to what to do when certain air quality thresholds are exceeded. Outside work, of course, is one of those things. So you need to stop the outside work, and in nations where we haven't got that, social and political drivers and structures and privilege to be able to have those in place, that can be a real challenge.
Speaking of that, there are a lot of changes in terms in policies and strategies, and one among the aspects that we are given as the government here provide more attention to is the issue of fire. They have one of the policies that it is better to have control bans that helps to reduce the risk of eruptions of fire, especially during dry season.
Yeah, out of control fires.
Definitely. So the attention that we're giving it in this matter, this policy based on air quality, how much is it affecting air quality within the cities and everything? And once it is the controlled one, can we say we can control it also to not cause more pollution in the cities?
So there are tools now for our fire controllers to be able to work out whether or not it will cause an air pollution event in the cities and that sort of thing. They're obviously looking at a number of things. They don't want to. They want still conditions. They want and those still conditions can mean that you might have an event that is detrimental for the local region and or the cities that are around. So there is the problem. It depends on which risk you're wanting to mitigate there. Big massive fires are obviously really detrimental to health. So do want to get in front of that. It's about reducing those fuel loads. It's also looking to our Indigenous cultures here in Australia. A lot of those Indigenous knowledge holders, they're working with them because of they've lived with fire for 40,000 years. Our plants here in Australia are all adapted to fire, and so it's a lot of knowledge and the knowledge systems into how to manage fire so that it doesn't become an air pollution or a human tragedy.
That actually is a very good point, and I really wish someday to find a person that we can sit down and discuss how Indigenous community in here for over 40,000 years manage disasters, because over the past couple of years we've experienced dust storms, extreme fires, and so and so. And we hope that we can have more and good information from the cultural perspective, how actually they did it, because we're doing it in a scientific way, discussing about the ways that we can prevent and so and so.
Well, our Indigenous colleagues are just the latest generation of scientists, and the very first scientists are from the Indigenous world, obviously.
That is fantastic.
And so we always acknowledge that the Indigenous peoples here in Australia are the first scientists. And we've got some great people here in our school who would be pretty happy to talk to you, I'm sure.
Definitely. We have to arrange that one. That one have to be arranged. So as we are approaching the end of our episode of today, if you're given an opportunity to, let's say, it's a mark of change, you have to speak to the world, but you have to divide it based on a different continent. If you have an opportunity to speak to the African governments and organizations, those who are dealing with environmental crisis and everything, what will be the message that you can deliver to them?
Well, I guess I've been involved in, the Montreal Protocol and those international policy agreements and things. It's really about bringing the people that are on the ground, the people that are actually interfacing and leaders in those spaces, bring them along on the journey, because we all benefit when we've got clean air.
Globally here in Australia, what will be the message?
Same message.
To join together to find a way that we can solve the problem. Thanks that our education system is evolving. We know a lot right now, and I think it won't be good enough if we pretend like we don't know enough, so we make poor choices. We always have to understand that it always comes from the education, and thank God we have a very good educational system that are trying so hard to educate people through different researches, providing different informations for people to understand how we can balance to live together with us humans and our natural environment. Now, I don't know about you and what you believe in, but the one thing that I do believe is that environment was created first before humanity. So it is a thing that's supposed to take good care of us, but it is our responsibility to take good care of environment so as we can take care of. Wishing you have very, very good and happy weekend. Until next time, Simon William, this is Gaia's Tales. I'm signing out, but I hope next week I have something very special. Last time when I had a meeting here, when I talked to Aditya, we've discussed about the new research from Andrew King from the University of Melbourne here, and it's very good research that have a very good findings that reaching net zero won't be actually the grand finale that we always hoped for. There's a lot that we have to learn, and I have a good news that next episode I'll be sitting down with Andrew King, gonna have a cup of coffee, and he's gonna tell us what really was he find out. Until next time, I'm signing out. Bye bye.